over 1,000 years ago in China, at the bottom of Yunling Mountain, there was a small village. The villagers, they had a good life, a pretty dull life, not much going on, until one day, a huge serpent appeared. Well, they didn't see it at first because this serpent, which was 80 feet long, would have filled their only street in town and wider than an oxen cart. It lived way up high on the mountain. It had found a cave up there in which to live, and it pretty much minded its own business. It ate whatever came its way. Rabbits, squirrels, deer. But finally, those animals got smart and they left that mountain. So the creature had no animals to eat. So it made its way down the mountain to the little village, where there it began to steal the livestock, the pigs, the cattle, the sheep, and the occasional unwary villager. Well, soon the whole village was up in arms. They went to the magistrate, they knocked on his door, and they said, "Magistrate, you must do something about this monstrous supernatural serpent. It's killing our food. It's killing our children." Well, he was pretty scared himself, and he thought, "What can I do? What can I do?" He said, "Well, let's see if we can send some animals up to the serpent, if that does it." Well, they tried that, taking some animals up the mountain and leaving them. But it didn't matter anymore. That serpent had grown ravenous and greedy and kept coming down the mountain to the village. Well, who should show up with the answer that the magistrate needed but a sorcerer? Now, this sorcerer, he met the magistrate. He said, "Let me tell you, sir, I have a few things that I need, but I can come up with an answer, a solution to your problem." The magistrate said, "What? Anything?" "Well, first, you must provide me with a fine house, with all the food that I could need, all the luxuries that you can afford. Once you do that, I will go inside for 3 days and meditate and come out with the answer." Well, the magistrate had no other solution. After all, it was a supernatural creature. It took a supernatural sorcerer to do something about it. So he agreed. In fact, the only large house in the whole village was his, and he gladly moved out. His wife wasn't quite so happy, and the sorcerer moved in. Sure enough, the sorcerer went inside, closed the doors, and for 3 days, they waited. Finally, on the 3rd day, all of the villagers had gathered around the house with the magistrate, eager to know the answer. The sorcerer came out. He looked troubled. He held his head. He said, "Oh, you would never believe what I saw. In my dreams, the serpent came to me. He smelled horrific." The magistrate's nose twitched. "And he spoke to me with that ghastly breath, saying, 'There's only one thing that will placate him.'" "What is it?" said the magistrate. "Once a year, on the 1st day of the 8th month, you must give a sacrifice, a 14-year-old maiden, to this serpent. And only if you do that will he leave the village and the whole district alone. If you do not, he will destroy all of you." Their children? How could they do that? The villagers looked at each other, but the magistrate, he was also horrified. But when the sorcerer said to him, oh, yes, but think how wise the king will think you are to have saved the entire district and all its animals with just one sacrifice a year. And so the magistrate, he agreed, and sadly, it began. Year after year, a young 14-year-old girl was sent up that mountain to the serpent's lair to be eaten alive and never to be seen again. As each year passed, the sorcerer had a great deal. You see, he had this fine house. And not only that, but all the wealthy people would meet him in secret and bribe him not to take their daughters. So he simply had to go to the poor people, offer them a small reward for their daughter. And he was set. Oh, he was getting fat with all his wealth. After 9 years had passed, at that point, the sorcerer was having a hard time getting any girls. I told you it was a small village. And besides, he could tell that perhaps these poor people were hiding their daughters from him. Even they could not be bought off. But one day, that 10th year, Chi, a young 14-year-old, the oldest of 6 daughters, decided she'd seen enough. All of her friends, some of her family had died because of this serpent. She was going to do something about it. So she went to her parents, honorable parents. I am just one of 6 daughters. We have no dowry. You are burdened with us perhaps the rest of your lives. Allow me to go and be the sacrifice this year. Daughter, no, we can't. We can't do that. We love you. We love you as much as all of our daughters. We don't care about the dowry. We don't care if you never find a husband. You must stay. She knew that that's probably what they would say. So the next night, she slipped off and met the sorcerer in private. She told the sorcerer that she would go and be the sacrifice, but he must give her certain things to take with her. A hunting dog, a fierce hunting dog, a sword, a packet of flour and honey and rice cakes, and flint to start a fire. Oh, young lady, you believe you can defeat this serpent? I think not. But of course, I'll be happy to give those things to you and a small reward to your family as well. So the deal was struck. And when the day came to leave, Chi showed up at the sorcerer's house. He gave her the things that she requested, had a fierce little dog ready to go. And he began to lead her up the mountain toward the lair of the serpent. Now, as it turned out, of course, the sorcerer was so out of shape from his opulent life that he began to puff and puff on the way up the trail to finally about halfway through. Of course, he wasn't going to go any further anyway. He said, "You must go on your own. Farewell." And back he went to the village. On Chi went. Oh, she got closer and closer and closer to the cave where that serpent was. She could smell this horrendous smell. And she came into a slight clearing, and there before her was the yawning, dark mouth of a cave, and she could hear the serpent was napping in the middle of the day, and it was breathing in and out, and as the breath came out of the cave, it almost knocked her over. The dog whimpered, and they both froze for a moment in fright. But finally she got to work. She found a flat stone, and she started a fire under the stone, and when the stone was hot, she put the flour on the stone. She put some honey with that flour, began to stir it, and then broke up the rice cakes on top, and began to smell so delicious. It completely masked the horrible stench of the serpent. In fact, it smelled so good that it woke the serpent up, just as she had hoped. And she heard it begin to slither out of the cave. And when it slipped out, it rose so high. Its mouth yawned with teeth like swords, its eyes like palace mirrors, and it began to plunge toward that aromatic food. Well, of course, she and the dog had rushed back out of the way, and when that serpent bit into that hot food, it screeched with pain, and it reared back and began to writhe, looking for whoever caused it this pain. And at that moment, the dog jumped up and grabbed one of its eyes and ripped it out. And the serpent again screeched, and it twirled around, and it began to look again with its good eye, and the dog aimed for that eye, and just as it did, reached up to that eye, Li Chi stepped under the serpent. She took her sword, and she went up with a thrust that went through its mouth and into its brain, and it fell dead. Li Chi and the dog were exhausted, but soon they were able to recover, and Li Chi went into the cave. She went into the cave, and there she saw the bones of the 9 girls who had died before. She gathered the bones. She said, "Oh, if only you had not been so timid, you might be alive." She carried them back down to the village, the dog with her. And when they got there, she showed the bones to the families. She said, "I have killed the serpent," but nobody believed her, even though she brought the evidence of these dead girls. So finally, she convinced a few of the bravest men to go back up. She led them up, and they saw for themselves the serpent was dead. And so when they came back down, there was a great celebration. She became a hero. The news went all the way to the king, and he made her father the magistrate. Oh, and the sorcerer kind of slinked off before anybody could catch him. And to this day, they tell the story and they sing a song of Li Chi, the Serpent Slayer.